Hello, my name is Mr. Port and I am the Deputy Head of Meadowside Primary School, and this is my presentation on anti-bullying at our school. It is anti-bullying week and all schools will have anti-bullying policies that are kind of the same and will deliver the same sort of message, but each school will have one that fits in with their school culture. I think probably the most important thing for me to mention is that bullying can happen anywhere. And I include our school in that. We are always striving to be a school where we stamp out bullying, but obviously that's an incredibly difficult thing to do when you have so many people together in one place. Bullying can happen in the workplace, bullying can happen at schools, colleges, universities, and it's not so much about that prevention, it's also about how you deal with it when it does happen. So prevention is obviously incredibly important in education, but you can do that as much as you want, but these things will still happen, and it's how you deal with them as an establishment like our school. So, as you can read there, we're really committed to providing a caring, friendly and safe environment. I think if you've set foot in our school and you've spoken to our staff and our children, I think you would absolutely agree that that is the environment and the culture that we offer at Meadowside, a really friendly and happy place to be. So the objectives of our anti-bullying policy, okay, is to educate. Like I said earlier, prevention is a really important part. So prevention, the best way to do that is through education. Okay, so our whole school community, not just the children, but the staff and parents as well, need to understand what bullying and hate is. I'll come to a definition of what hate is in a minute. To reduce bullying and hate incidences in our school, okay, that's obviously a massive goal. We can, ensure a really safe environment where if something does happen, it's dealt with really quickly. Okay, and that links to sort of number 3, making sure that if there is bullying happening, we deal with it very quickly. Okay, so from our education perspective at Meadowside, how do we let our school community know what bullying is? Well, it's a really hard thing for children to understand the lower you go in age, and we obviously have 4 to 11-year-olds at our school. Okay. Now, some people jump straight to the word bullying when someone says something unkind or hurts them, and those are really unkind things, but they don't necessarily fit into the category of bullying. So in order to define bullying at Meadowside, we look for something that is several times on purpose, and that will be a discussion between children and staff about what that looks like and what that sounds like. Okay, you can see that the first letter of every word spells stop. Really important line underneath that is that bullying results in pain and distress to the victim. There is absolutely no doubt that bullying can be a really damaging and terrible experience for people unless the school or establishment is able to deal with it effectively. So it's identifying it early. Okay, quite often I've heard parents and staff say in the past, we're just going to nip this in the bud before it turns into anything else. And I think that could be the early stages of bullying. It might not be bullying, but it's trying to prevent something happening that could be bullying. Okay, so every case is different and unique, and it's important to mention that. If there's an allegation of bullying, it obviously needs to be investigated very thoroughly by staff with the children, and sometimes parents and governors. Will come to that later. But it's important that every child understands what the several times on purpose means. Okay, and with 4-year-olds, we work around the language with that. So, we might not say several and we might not say purpose, because children have a very, very different understanding of what purpose and accident is when they're 4 and 5 years old. So we make sure that we work with them on the language and simplify that for them, so everybody understands. Okay. In the objectives there, you saw that there was also the word hate, or hate crime, hate incident. So you may or may not be aware about hate crimes, but they're offences which are motivated by hostility, or prejudice. Okay, so that could be to do with race, gender, for example. They fit under the category of what would be a hate incident. okay, at school, although we do teach our year 5s and 6s about, you know, ages of arrest, and the age of arrest is 10. So you could apply a criminal act to a 10-year-old. We're not trying to terrify them. It's really important. And what we're trying to do is educate them. Okay, hate and hate incidents and hate crimes, quite new vocabulary, 2014. Okay, the children need to know that if you say certain things to certain people because of their appearance, for example, then you are going to get in a lot of trouble, potentially with the police. Now, one easy example to name is racism. The children know racism is wrong. You speak to any child, in, you know, particularly the older children, they may have some lack of awareness of understanding what it is, but you can have a conversation about it if a racist incident occurs as to why that's wrong, and hopefully that education can lead to a reduction in incidents and just a general more tolerant and accepting sort of school society. So we asked the children in assembly on Monday, and we asked the children around the school what bullying is and what bullying isn't. So you can one of the children in reception said bullying is where you're unkind, and I think it's really important to put that. Although that child didn't say several times on purpose, they recognise bullying as a bad thing, and it's maybe a little bit more education there required, but it's really good they were able to identify that at such a young age. And the next child I went to in assembly said several times on purpose, also said not by accident. So they were just sort of double downing on what bullying is, which I thought was a really good description. Someone said doing something again, being mean a lot, calling me lots of names. And I think it's important to recognise here that the children mentioned quite a lot of verbal things in that list. They didn't go into the physical so much. I've not dealt with very many incidents of physical bullying at Meadowside. It's mostly verbal or cyber. They seem to be the top, you know, incidences, but you can get physical bullying as well, but they perhaps haven't associated that to bullying more frequently. It's also quite hard to define bullying unless you've been bullied, I think, for a lot of children. So, you know, we need to educate everybody here, not just in anti-bullying week, but beyond that as well. And what bullying isn't, they talked about one-off things. So you might not choose to play with someone that day, and although that is sad and could be considered unkind, what we would say at Meadowside is, if a child came to me on the playground and said, someone said they don't want to play with me, and, you know, I'll do a little bit of investigation on that, and it will be because perhaps those two children are playing tennis. I say, well, maybe you can't join in that game today, and I'll say to the children, is it okay if they play later, or you play a different game? And they're always like, yeah, that's fine. And I'll take that child and say, look, let's go and find someone else to play with, let's go and do something else together even. So it's about managing their emotions in tricky circumstances they see as tricky circumstances. For us, it might not seem like anything, but actually we've got to take what they're saying seriously and help them understand, that's not that kind what that person's doing or those people are doing, but it's more of a circumstance thing than they don't want to play with you. It might be saying something unkind. In the parent meeting at the beginning of the week, I talked about the fact that children can be really unpleasant to each other. Those of you that have more than one child will definitely know that, but children can say some really unkind things and really unpleasant things. That is part of growing up. Okay, we cannot eliminate children saying horrible things to each other. They can be mean. Adults can be mean. Okay, it's less accepting for an adult to be mean, of course it is, because we should have built up the skills by then, but children will get cross and they'll say and do things without thinking. And we need to really remember that. There's a difference between a 5-year-old doing and saying something and an 11-year-old doing and saying something as well. Okay, we expect that 11-year-old to be able to have equipped themselves with the skills. The 5-year-old is still learning. Okay, school is a challenging and difficult place to be, and they have to really concentrate in their learning, sometimes at playtimes, which can be the trickiest parts of the day. Things happen and children make mistakes, and it's really important that we understand that and we accept that children will make mistakes, hurt each other, they will say horrible things to each other, but it's how we deal with those as adults. Okay, and if we make a massive deal out of someone calling someone a name, then everything becomes a big deal, and we're not helping with that situation. If someone says something unkind, we deal with it quickly. We make sure that child knows that's unkind and unpleasant thing to say, and we move on and we start again with absolute positive regard for those children. Where bullying comes in, that's where we go, there's a bit of a pattern here. This child's feeling really unhappy. Oh, okay, this child or this group of children have been picking on this child for a few days now. We could be looking at the early stages of bullying, or we could be looking at bullying. Okay, so children will scrap and fight. We know that happens, but we need to distinguish the difference between whether that's bullying, although it can be very serious, whether it's bullying or whether it's one-off. So I think that is for our really experienced staff to work through and decide. Obviously, we work with parents on this as well. Quite a lot of reports that I get of bullying come through parents, because children, just before bedtime, they want to tell you that thing, don't they? They want to offload, and they'll offload something, and it might have been for a couple of nights that they're offloading a similar story that happened again and again, and those parents will come to teachers or staff at school and explain the situation, and then we investigate it further. So that difference between one-off and several times on purpose can come through a variety of different channels. Okay, so all the things you see on the right hand side are unpleasant, but they might not be bullying, and that's for us to decide as a school and to work with you as parents on. Okay, so we talk about the categories of bullying. Okay, so emotional bullying. Okay, let you have a little read of that. Physical bullying, mentioned that one. Racist, so that links to hate that I talked about earlier. Sexual. Gender and sexual orientation. Again, linking to hate. Verbal. And cyber. It may be that the cyberbullying at the bottom there doesn't have any association with your child because they're 4 or 5 and are not in, they haven't made that connection with the online world, but they will, and it's really important. Some of the most complex, challenging bullying situations for us as a school is cyberbullying. Okay, they are really, really difficult things to unpick because so much of it happens outside of school, but the results of it get brought into school. And it is really, really difficult and really distressing for the children. It can be really difficult for the staff to actually find out what's happened and find that trail. As parents, it's very, very distressful, obviously, if you're having to deal with that, or you suddenly find something on your child's phone. But if we make sure we remember to put several times on purpose against all of those things, that is really important. However, if we're thinking about hate, so we look at racism, gender and sexual orientation, they would be dealt with slightly differently, as would sexual, because that would be something we would deal with immediately in the moment. Okay, so you can get racist incidents that are not necessarily bullying, if that makes sense, but we still take them really, really seriously, as we do everything. Okay. So what do we tell the children to do if they feel they are being bullied, or they spot and think someone else may be being bullied? So again, it links to the first letter. The first letter of every word there, links to stop. Okay, start telling other people. So several times on purpose links to start telling other people. We'll only get to the bottom of it if children tell us, are honest with us, and we find we can get to the bottom of it quickly, and we can deal with it there and then. Okay, the theme of this year's Anti-Bullying Week is about making a noise about bullying, which links brilliantly to start telling other people. And we've spoken to the children about that already, and we'll remind them tomorrow. Okay, so who do they tell? They might tell their parents, they might tell their friends, they might tell us. it doesn't matter who they tell, as long as it gets back to the adults that really hopefully enforce a change, then we'll be we'll be successful. These posters you'll find around the school. They cover the three main categories of bullying, and you can see the several times on purpose and the stop there. The other information is mainly for us to refer to for us as staff to make sure we're following the right procedure. You don't need to worry about that too much, but for the children to recognise bullying. Okay, this was made about 10 years ago for children. It probably did a bit of an update in terms of the graphics, but the message is exactly the same. So what do we do to support children that have been bullied? What do we do to help the person that is the bully? Because that's important in this as well. We would get a member of the senior leadership team involved. We work with parents. We sometimes might work with governors. For the person that has been the bully, we would look at a loss of privileges and make sure that we're working with those parents closely as well. We might have to put an action plan in for the person that is the bully and the person that is being bullied to make sure that they are both safeguarded and both protected going forward. But it's about a partnership more than anything, making parents and teachers work together to ensure that the safety of their children. Like I said, children will make mistakes. Okay, it will happen. Bullying does happen at Meadowside, but it's how we deal with it that is the most important thing. And we are proud of how we deal with things at Meadowside. I certainly learn, I should say, a lot every time there's a bullying incident about how I can help children and families more in the future. But my message for you to sort of leave you with would be, ask your child what bullying is. Ask your child at home what they would do if they spotted bullying or if they felt they were bullied themselves. That is as simple as it needs to be. Speak to us if you have any worries or concerns, even if you want to come to us on the gate in the morning and say, excuse me, Miss Thomas, I've got a bit of an issue that's coming up, could I speak to the class teacher? It might be Mr. Main, for example, and we'll get you in touch, and you can speak to the teacher about your concerns, or speak to one of us, and we can help decide whether we think it is bullying or not, and what steps we take in that next to make sure that child's feeling safe and that child's feeling happy. So there's lots that we can do, and we have fantastic relationships with the children and parents at our school, so we hope we can use that to help everybody move forward, and hopefully Anti-Bullying Week will be a real success for everybody, all the children in particular, in understanding what bullying is and what they can do about it. Thank you for listening. I hope I haven't waffled too much. Goodbye.